Okay, now I'm just going to wrap up this what is metaphysics section just by introducing some more terminology here, which is important. All right. Okay, another important distinction in metaphysics is this distinction between a token and a type. So this comes up in metaphysics. It also comes up in philosophy of mind. All right. So focus for a moment just on this slide. So it says dog, dog, dog. Okay. Now, if I were to ask you how many words are written on this slide, how many would you say? One or three, right? So it seems if you say, well, there's only one word written here, you're correct in one sense, but it also seems you're correct if you say there are three words written here, right? So that is the difference between a type and a token. So if I ask you the question how many types of words there are, the correct answer to that is one. But if I ask you how many token instances of a word there are, the correct answer to that would be three, right? So by a type, we just mean sort of the general kind, and then the token would be how many individual distinct instances there are of that kind, okay? Now, if on the slide, suppose we had dog, cat, human, right? Dog, cat, human instead of dog, dog, dog. In this case, there would be three tokens, but each individual token is also of a distinct type. So when I have dog, 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 I have one type and three tokens. But if I had dog, cat, human, I would have three tokens and three types. Okay, so that's the difference between a token and a type. Now, with respect to metaphysical views about reality, okay, we can talk about views of reality in terms of this question, and keep in mind the question we're asking is how many kinds of things are there? Okay, well, we can ask that question with respect to type. How many distinct types of things, or right, categories of things? So if we're dividing, once again, dividing reality up into categories, how many categories or kinds or types do we actually need? Now, but we can also ask how many token individuals there are. So how many types of objects are there? But we can also just ask the question, how many objects are there? Just in terms of the actual number of individual distinct objects there are, or things there are, regardless of whether or not those things are of different types or the same type. Okay. All right. So here's the first option. The first option would be some form of type monism. So mono coming from the word one. Okay, so type monism is the position that there is only one fundamental kind of thing. Okay, so there is only one kind of thing that either is the basic building block of reality, or there is only one thing that is explanatorily primitive, or there is only one thing that persists through change. One kind of thing that persists through change. And everything that exists at all, everything that exists at all is made of that one fundamental kind of thing. Okay? Now, so the fact that we might be able to make distinctions in reality conceptually, well, as far as explanation goes, everything is basically explained by one kind of thing. Okay? So in the sciences, for example, if you're going to be like a really hard reductionist in science, and you're going to say, well, fundamentally everything is just quarks and optons and bosons and electromagnetic fields and wave function, blah blah blah, all that sort of stuff. Okay, well, what then would be chemistry and biology, let alone like psychology and sociology? Okay, well, if you're a reductionist of this kind, you're going to say, all right, well, what the biologists are doing, they're just doing really specialized physics, right? They're really doing physics. The chemists, they're really doing physics. Because why? Because that's what's fundamental, and even the distinction between quantum mechanics and Newtonian mechanics. Well, the people doing Newtonian mechanics are really just doing quantum mechanics. They're just using different language and different concepts. But if we're talking about reality itself, or if we're talking about metaphysically what is actually there, hey, it's all just quantum particles. It's all just, energy and dark. That's all it is. So there's nothing to biology other than quantum mechanics, let alone psychology and sociology and economics and the social sciences. Everybody's just doing physics, and then the philosophers are like, well, and the physicists are just doing philosophy, but metaphysics, and that's another matter entirely. Okay, so if you're a type monist, you may say, all right, well, it may appear as if there are distinct kinds of things fundamentally, like biology is not reducible to chemistry, and chemistry is not reducible to physics, and that's not even reducible to quantum mechanics, and psychology is not reducible to biology, and sociology is not reducible to psychology. These aren't just secondary special cases of a more primitive or fundamental science. Okay, so if you're a non-reductionist, you have that option available. Okay, but if you're a non-reductionist and you're going to say no, there are distinct fundamental kinds, then you can't be a type monist. All right. Okay. Now, what kinds of versions of type monism are there? Okay. Well, here are two of the more popular options. All right. One version of type monism would be some form of physicalism. Okay. So physicalism would be the position that everything that exists at all is either entirely composed of particles of physics or is entirely dependent upon things composed of particles of physics. Okay, so reality is fundamentally physical. There are no non-physical kinds of things. Okay, this used to be called materialism, but contemporarily we opt for physicalism, and here's why. There are clearly physical phenomena that are not composed of matter. So if there is a such thing as dark matter, it's not composed of matter, but it would be a mistake to say that dark matter is non-physical. It's dark matter is not a spiritual reality or an immaterial. Well, it's immaterial in a technical sense. It's immaterial just in terms of it's not made of matter. But it would be a mistake to say that you know dark matter and gravitational waves are non-physical realities. No, they're clearly physical realities. They're not spiritual or ghostly in that respect. They're not made of ghost stuff, as I've said elsewhere. But they're clearly physical. So physicalism is compatible with there being, gravitational waves and dark matter and maybe even strings and things like that. Okay. All right. And then another version of type monism would be some version of idealism. Okay. So physicalism would be the position that everything that exists in its entirety is physical. Um, Idealism is the position that everything that exists at all is mental. So everything that exists, and this is George Berkeley's version, the Irish philosopher George Berkeley. George Berkeley says that everything that exists is either an individual mind or is a mental event or a mental state within a mind. So there is nothing to reality other than minds and mental states. Okay. Now, the straightforward reading of idealism would be that, well, if idealism is true, nothing physical actually exists. The whole of reality is non-physical. There's no such thing as matter. There's no such thing as anything physical. Nothing is composed of matter. Nothing is divisible into material parts, proper parts, or anything like that. Nothing is identical to any physical or material thing. Now, I've heard some idealists say, no, idealism is perfectly compatible with the existence of matter. So if you just specify that matter is not mind independent or physical things are not mind independent, then idealism is compatible with the existence of matter. Idealism is compatible with the existence of things that are physical. I don't think this works at all. I don't think that redefining matter or physical things in terms of mind dependent, matter is not mind independent. I don't think this move works at all, but I'm not going to argue for that here. Maybe I'll do that in another video. Okay. Now, And then, so if type monism, one, mono, the other option would be type dualism. So type dualism is the position that there are at least two distinct fundamental kinds of things. So there could be more than two, but there are at least two distinct fundamental kinds of things. Okay, so the type dualist would deny that physicalism is true. The type dualist would also deny that idealism is true. So you can't be a strict type dualist and be a physicalist. You also can't be a strict type dualist and be an idealist. Okay. Now I should mention here that sometimes physicalism is qualified to mean physicalism with respect to human persons. So you can be a physicalist with respect to human persons, but be a non-physicalist with respect to everything else. I mean, so for example, I'm a physicalist about human persons. I don't think human persons are numerically identical to any immaterial thing, nor do I think that we have any immaterial thing as a proper part. But I'm not a physicalist with respect to the whole of reality. So I think you and I are physical objects. I think we are animals, to be more specific. But I think that abstract objects and things like numbers are real, but they're non-physical. So I'm a physicalist about human persons, but I'm a non-physicalist about the whole of reality. So I'm a type dualist about the whole of reality, but I'm a type monist when it comes to human persons. Okay. All right. Now, as far as distinctions of kinds, if you're a type dualist, okay, this is probably the most common distinction that a lot of type dualists are going to make, and that is going to be the distinction between physical kinds and mental kinds. All right, so key example of this would be our good friend Rene Descartes, who I talked about in the video on the introduction to epistemology. Okay, so Rene Descartes is what's known as an interactionist substance dualist. So there's a distinction between the mind and the body, but Descartes thinks that the mind and the body causally interact with each other. Okay, so when I'm talking about the mind, I'm talking about one kind of thing, one kind of object. And when I'm talking about the body, I'm talking about a completely different kind of object. So Descartes denies that the mind is a function of the body or is a part of the body, nor is the body a function or a part of the mind. So when you're talking about your mind, that's one object. When you're talking about your body, that's another object. They're two distinct substances, but they nevertheless causally interact with each other. And Descartes says that they are not naturally separable from each other. So for Descartes' mind-body dualism is completely different from someone like Plato's. So, the Platonist view is like that the soul is imprisoned within the body and that your soul is going to like leave your body when you die, and there's kind of this precarious relationship between your soul and your body. Descartes does not think that. Descartes does not think that the relationship between your soul and your body is this loose, like where if you sneeze, your soul might leave your body and then return back to it. So Descartes thinks that since the soul and the body are not naturally separable, only God really, being like God, would have the power to separate the soul from the body and preserve the soul and the body sort of independently of each other. All right. Okay. Now, obviously, the question here is, okay, well, with respect to kinds, so there's a difference between, at least in philosophy of mind, what's known as substance dualism and property dualism. So the substance dualist is going to say, no, the mind and the body are distinct kinds of objects, they're distinct things. The property dualist isn't going to go that far. So what the property dualist says is that, okay, you're one thing which just has two kinds of properties. You have physical properties and you have mental properties, and your mental properties are not explained or reducible to or explained in terms of your physical properties, and likewise your physical properties aren't explained in terms of your mental properties. Okay, well, if we're talking about distinction of properties, well, a physical property would be a property that only physical objects have. Okay, so only if you know that something has mass, or you know that something weighs 10 pounds, you know that it's physical. I would even say if you know that something is extended in space, then you know it's physical, or located in space, then you know it's physical. Mental properties, ways of characterizing mental properties would be things like intentionality, the capacity to be about things, subjective access, so I'm directly aware introspectively of my thoughts and feelings and desires, but I'm not introspectively aware of the states of my brain. So some philosophers have argued, well, it seems I have a certain kind of access to my mental states that I don't have to the physical states of my brain, but if they were one and the same thing, I would have the same kind of access to both. But I mean, if you think about it, I can directly will my arm to go up. I can't directly will my spleen to stop spleening. Well, my spleening is a physical event. My arm going up is something I have direct control over, but I don't have direct control over my spleening. Well, since my spleening is a physical event, but and I don't have any direct control over that, but I do have direct control over my arm going up or down. My arm going up or down must not be a physical event, but clearly that's false. My arm going up or down is a physical event. Now, if you're a dualist, you're going to say, well, even if your arm going up and down is not it clearly is a physical event, it might not be only a physical event. So there might be a mental event uh, which is involved here, which is not reducible to the physical event. Okay, so we're not going to get into that debate here, but all that to say, I don't think these kinds of access arguments for dualism work. The idea that I have introspective access to attitudes and beliefs and desires, but I don't have introspective access to physical states of my brain. Well, maybe I do, right? Okay, or private, subjective, and privileged access. Okay, now token dualism. If you think there's more than one person watching this video right now, hey, you're a token dualist. Token dualism is the position that there are at least two distinct individuals. Okay, now whether or not those token individuals are of the same type or of different types, that doesn't matter. Okay, so if there's one dog and one cat, there are distinct individuals of different types. If there's one human and another human, there's two distinct individuals of the same type. Okay, so token dualism is compatible with both type dualism and type monism. So you can be a type monist and a token dualist, and you can also be a type dualist and a token dualist as well. Okay, so if you think there's at least two distinct things, individual distinct objects, regardless of whether or not they're of the same type or of distinct types, you're a token dualist. Okay, and then the last option I'll mention here would be token monism. Token monism is the position that there is only one individual. So if you ask a token monist how many objects are there, they're going to say one. There's only one. All right. Now, examples of token monists in history, probably the earliest one would be the philosopher Parmenides. If you ask Parmenides how many things exist, Parmenides would say, well, there's only one thing. There's only one substance, reality, the one. That's it. So the token monist who says that there's only one individual, token monism is the position that reality is not divisible into parts, whether those be proper parts or not. Reality is not divisible. There's only one thing, there's only one substance, reality itself, or Spinoza says the one substance is God. It may appear to us as if reality is made of parts. It may appear to us that reality is divisible. It may appear to us as if there are distinct, unique individuals. That is all an illusion, Parmenides says. Okay, now in Parmenides' arguments are that it's metaphysically impossible for reality to be made of parts. So, if you're with Parmenides and you say, well, clearly you're wrong because look, there's me and there's you and we're not the same thing, Parmenides is just going to shake his head and say, no, the very idea that reality is made of parts, the very idea that there's a plurality which are unified in some kind of way into one thing. It's not a matter of there being one thing that's made of many parts. If there are many parts, then there's not one reality. There are multiple realities. But if there's only one reality, then reality cannot be made of parts. His arguments are based on the fact that it's metaphysically or logically impossible for reality to be made of parts. So saying, hey, there's you and there's me, he's going to say, no, that's an illusion. Okay. Now, so clearly token monism has not been a particularly popular option in the history of metaphysics, but the arguments in favor of token monism do get rather sophisticated. Same with the arguments for idealism as well. So I don't want you going away from this video poo-pooing either idealism or token monism. Yeah, because in the history of philosophy, there are some rather impressive and sophisticated arguments for these positions. So you can't say that there's nonsensical positions simply in virtue of not understanding the arguments in favor of them. Okay, so if you're interested in those kinds of things, send me an email and I'll give you some resources to read. But we're not going to be going over Parmenides' arguments or even Spinoza's arguments here. Okay, all right, so that will suffice for a brief introduction to metaphysics. And once again, if you have any questions, do not hesitate to email me. Thank you.